The massive ship called the Nexus moved through space like a floating city. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in lights that blinked like stars. Inside this giant vessel, the most powerful beings in the galaxy made decisions that affected billions of lives. Admiral Zethkar stood in the main command center, his reptilian scales catching the blue light from the screens around him. He had ruled space battles for over 300 years. His kind, the Vraxians, were one of the 12 races that controlled the Galactic Council. They decided who lived, who died, and who could travel between the stars. Admiral, called his aide, a bird-like creature with silver feathers. We have new reports from the outer territories. Zethkar turned his large head toward the screen. The data showed a small yellow star with several planets around it. One of the planets was blue and green, covered mostly in water. What am I looking at? A primitive species, sir. They call themselves humans. They live on the third planet from their star. Our scouts say they just learned how to travel faster than light. They are spreading to nearby star systems. The Admiral laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Another young race thinks they can explore the galaxy. How many ships do they have? Maybe 100, sir. Small ones. Nothing that could threaten us, Zethkar nodded. This happened every few decades. Some new species would discover space travel and think they owned the universe. The Council had a simple way to deal with this problem. They would arrive with overwhelming force, show the newcomers who really ruled space, and then add them to their empire. Send word to the other council members, Zethkar ordered. Tell them we have a new integration to perform. Within hours, ships from across the galaxy began moving toward the human solar system. The council fleet grew larger and larger. Warships the size of mountains joined the group. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy entire cities. The aliens inside these ships had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same method over and over again. The plan was always the same. Arrive in overwhelming numbers. Demand a meeting with the planet's leaders. Show them recordings of what happened to other worlds that refused to join the Council. Most species surrendered immediately. Those that didn't were crushed completely. Zethkar studied the reports about humans while the fleet assembled. The creatures were young, maybe 10,000 years old as a civilization. They had only recently learned to use metal and electricity. Their fastest ships could barely reach other stars in their local area. They had no shields, no energy weapons, no technology worth mentioning. Perfect for integration, he muttered to himself. The Council had rules about new species. First, they would be tested. If they were smart enough and useful enough, they could become servants of the Council races. They would mine resources, build ships, and serve the greater galactic civilization. If they were too primitive or too aggressive, they would be removed entirely. Humans seemed to fall into the first category. The scout reports showed they were good at building things and solving problems. They could probably serve as workers or soldiers for the Council forces. Their homeworld had plenty of water and metals that could be useful. Admiral, his aide reported, the fleet is ready, 30 ships including the Nexus. Should we begin the jump to human space? Yes, set course for their outer colonies. We'll meet them at the edge of their territory and show them what real power looks like. The jump through hyperspace took several days. When the Council fleet arrived at the target coordinates, they were near a human colony world called New Geneva. It was a small planet with maybe 10 million humans living on it, perfect for making an impression. Zethkar activated the communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. Attention, human vessels. This is Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Council. You are ordered to send representatives for immediate diplomatic contact. Failure to comply will result in military action. The response came back within minutes. The voice was calm, speaking in clear words. Welcome to human space, Admiral. We appreciate the opportunity to meet. We'll send a representative to discuss matters with you. Zethkar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was going exactly as planned. The humans sounded polite and cooperative. They understood they were dealing with superior beings. This would be one of the easier integrations he had overseen. Excellent, he replied. Send your representative to these coordinates. We await your arrival. The Admiral turned to his staff. Begin recording everything. The other Council races will want to see how smoothly this operation goes. These humans seem more reasonable than most new species. His communications officer, a tall gray being with large black eyes, raised one thin hand. Sir, I'm detecting a hyperspace signature approaching our position. The human representative is arriving. Put it on the main screen. Let's see what kind of primitive vessel they send to meet the might of the Galactic Council. The screen showed the swirling colors of hyperspace as something large prepared to exit near their fleet. Zethkar expected to see a small human ship, maybe carrying a few dozen crew members and some crude weapons. He planned to be merciful with these young beings. They would make decent servants once they learned their proper place in the galaxy. Contact emerging from hyperspace in 10 seconds, the communications officer announced. Whatever they're sending, sir, it's quite large, Zethkar frowned. Large was relative. Even the biggest ship he'd seen from a primitive species was tiny, compared to Council vessels. How large? I'm getting strange readings, Admiral. This might be some kind of error in our sensors. Just show me the ship. The hyperspace window burst open like a flower blooming, and something emerged that made every alarm in the Council fleet begin screaming at once. What appeared was not a ship. It was not even a fleet of ships. It was something that defied every assumption Zethkar had made about these primitive humans. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen in space, bigger than many moons, stretching across the viewscreen like a metal wall that went on forever. The surface was covered with structures and weapons that seemed to go on for miles and miles. Lights blinked across its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The silence in the command center stretched for long moments as every member of Zethkar's crew tried to understand what they were seeing. Finally, his aide whispered, "Admiral, what is that thing?" Zethkar's throat felt dry. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of his command console. For the first time in 3 centuries of commanding fleets, he was looking at something that made his own flagship seem small and helpless. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I don't know what that is." The human vessel hung in space like a metal mountain that someone had stretched until it was longer than most cities. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UHSF Indomitable, watching the alien fleet through the massive viewing windows that ran along the front of her ship. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sensor station, "the alien vessels are maintaining their distance. They haven't moved since we arrived." Chen nodded. She had expected this reaction. The Indomitable was designed to make exactly this impression on anyone who saw it. At 200 kilometers long and 40 kilometers wide, it was more than a ship. It was a statement about what humanity could build when they put their minds to it. "Are their weapons powered?" she asked. "Some of them, Captain. The smaller ships activated their weapon systems when we dropped out of hyperspace. The big one in the center seems to be holding back. Smart of them. Signal all departments. We're now in diplomatic contact with an unknown alien civilization. Everyone stays alert, but nobody fires unless I give the order." The bridge of the Indomitable was itself larger than most spaceships. Hundreds of crew members worked at stations that controlled different parts of the massive vessel. The ship's artificial intelligence, called Aria, managed thousands of systems that no human crew could handle alone. "Captain Chen," Aria's voice came through the speakers. "I'm receiving a communication from the largest alien vessel. They're asking us to identify ourselves. Put them through, Aria." The main screen lit up with the image of a creature that looked like a giant lizard walking on 2 legs. Its scales were dark green with patches of black, and its eyes were bright yellow. When it spoke, its voice was deep and rough. "Human vessel, I am Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Council. You will state your identity and purpose immediately." Chen stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. She wore the dark blue uniform of the United Human Space Force, with the silver stars of a fleet captain on her collar. Her brown hair was pulled back in a regulation style, and her dark eyes met the alien's gaze without fear. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Force vessel Indomitable. You requested a meeting with human representatives." "Here I am." The alien's face showed confusion. "This is your diplomatic vessel?" "That's correct, Admiral." "Is there a problem?" For several seconds, the alien said nothing. Chen could see him looking at something off-screen, probably getting reports about the size and power of her ship. She had seen this reaction before, during humanity's first contact with the automated probe from the galactic rim. Size and strength spoke a universal language. "Captain Chen," the Admiral finally said, "your vessel is unusually large for a diplomatic mission." "Is it?" "We weren't sure what to expect from first contact with an alien civilization. We thought it was better to be prepared." Chen's voice stayed calm and polite. "How large is your diplomatic vessel, Admiral?" "This is the Nexus flagship of the Galactic Council. It serves as our mobile capital and diplomatic center." Chen looked at the readings on her tactical display. The alien flagship was big by the standards of most civilizations, maybe 15 kilometers long. Impressive, but tiny compared to the Indomitable. It's a beautiful ship, Admiral. Much more elegant than our design. Captain, I must ask, what is the purpose of the weapon systems I'm detecting on your vessel? Defense, primarily. And deterrence. We've found that being strong enough to protect ourselves makes diplomatic conversations much more productive. Chen paused. You came here with 30 warships, Admiral. Were you planning to use those for diplomacy as well? The question hung in space between the two fleets. Chen could see the alien admiral struggling with the situation. He had probably never met another species that could match his firepower. The Galactic Council was used to being the biggest force in any conversation. Captain, Zethkar said slowly, perhaps we should discuss the terms of your integration into the Galactic Council. Integration? Chen raised an eyebrow. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Admiral. We're here to establish diplomatic relations between equals. Integration isn't on our agenda. Captain Chen, you must understand. The Galactic Council has governed this region of space for thousands of years. New species are integrated into our civilization for the benefit of galactic peace and stability. Chen turned to her communications officer. Commander Park, please transmit file package Delta 7 to the Admiral's ship. Transmitted, Captain. Admiral Zethkar, we've sent you some information about human civilization that might help clarify our position. Take a look at that data and then we can continue our discussion. Chen walked over to the tactical station while waiting for the aliens to review the files. The information package contained details about human space, including the locations of their colonies and the size of their fleet. It would give the aliens a better understanding of what they were dealing with. Captain, whispered Commander Park, are you sure we should tell them about our other Titan-class ships? They'll find out eventually, Commander. Better to be honest from the beginning. The tactical officer, a woman named Lieutenant Torres, was studying the alien fleet formation.
Captain, they're not arranged for combat.
It looks more like a parade formation, designed to look impressive rather than to fight effectively. They expected to intimidate us into surrender, Chen realized. This was never meant to be a real diplomatic meeting. It was meant to be a demonstration of power followed by our submission. Should we adjust our position, ma'am? No. We stay right here between them and New Geneva. Let them make the next move. After 10 minutes, Admiral Zethkar's image appeared on the screen again. His expression had changed completely. The confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like barely controlled fear. Captain Chen, he said carefully, according to your data, humanity controls 24 star systems and has a fleet of over 800 vessels. That's correct. And you have 6 more ships of this size? 7, actually. The UHSF Leviathan was completed last month. Chen didn't mention that 3 more Titan-class ships were under construction, or that humanity had been building them specifically in case this kind of situation arose. The alien was quiet for a long moment. Captain, may I ask why your species has built such a large military force? We learned early in our history that peace comes from strength, Admiral. We build these ships so we never have to use them in anger. When everyone knows you can defend yourself, most conflicts can be resolved through conversation. And if conversation fails, Chen's expression grew serious, then we're prepared for that possibility as well. But I'm hoping it won't come to that. We'd much rather have you as friends and trading partners than enemies. The communication ended abruptly. Chen could imagine the chaos on the alien command ship as they realized their overwhelming advantage had just turned into a potential disaster. The humans weren't primitive newcomers begging to join galactic civilization. They were potentially the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and they were offering friendship from a position of absolute strength. All stations, maintain alert status, Chen ordered. This conversation is far from over. Captain Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of the UHSF Indomitable, past the endless rows of crew quarters and workstations that housed her ship's population of 2 million people. The vessel was so large that it had its own internal transportation system, with trains that carried people and supplies from one section to another. She stopped at the observation deck on level 847, where a group of civilian scientists were studying the alien fleet through powerful telescopes. Dr. James Walsh, the ship's head of xenobiology, looked up from his instruments as she approached. Captain, we're getting some interesting readings from their vessels, he said. Their technology seems advanced, but not as advanced as we expected. How so? Their energy signature suggests they're using fusion reactors, similar to what we used 50 years ago. Their hull materials appear to be standard metal alloys, nothing exotic or particularly impressive. Dr. Walsh adjusted his telescope's focus. Honestly, Captain, I'm surprised they managed to build an interstellar civilization with this level of technology. Chen nodded. This matched the intelligence reports her government had been gathering for the past 20 years. Ever since humanity had developed long-range sensor arrays, they had been watching and listening to galactic civilization. The picture that emerged was troubling. The Galactic Council ruled through intimidation and overwhelming numbers, not superior technology. They conquered primitive species by showing up with huge fleets and demanding surrender. Most younger civilizations gave up immediately rather than fight against impossible odds. But humanity had never been good at giving up. Dr. Walsh, what's your assessment of their biological capabilities? Based on their ship designs and the brief communication we intercepted, I'd say most Council species are physically similar to humans. Some are stronger, some are faster, but nothing that would give them a significant advantage in individual combat. Their real power comes from organization and numbers. Chen left the observation deck and took a transport car to the command section of the ship. Along the way, she passed through the manufacturing districts, where automated factories produced everything the ship's crew needed. The Indomitable was designed to operate independently for years without needing supplies from human space. In the Strategic Planning Center, she found her senior officers reviewing data about the Galactic Council. Commander Park was studying star charts that showed the extent of Council territory. It covered most of the galaxy's inner regions with thousands of inhabited worlds under their control. Captain, Park said as she entered, we've been analyzing the Council's expansion patterns. They follow the same method everywhere. They find a young species, overwhelm them with superior numbers, and then integrate them into their empire as servant races. How many species are we talking about? At least 200 that we can identify from their communications. Possibly more. Park highlighted several star systems on the map. The scary part is how efficient they are. Most species surrender immediately when they see the size of a Council fleet. Chen studied the map. Red dots showed Council-controlled systems, while blue dots marked the handful of independent civilizations that had managed to avoid conquest. Human space was a tiny cluster of green dots on the galaxy's edge. What about those independent systems? How did they avoid integration? Lieutenant Commander Martinez, the ship's chief engineer, pulled up another display. Most of them are too far away for the Council to bother with, or they're in regions with dangerous space phenomena. A few seem to have reached some kind of accommodation with the Council, probably paying tribute in exchange for independence. And none of them ever fought back? Not successfully. We found records of at least a dozen species that tried to resist. They were completely destroyed. Not just conquered, and wiped out entirely. Martinez's expression was grim. The Council doesn't tolerate defiance. Chen walked over to the display showing the current tactical situation. The alien fleet was still maintaining its distance from the Indomitable, but she could see they were sending out scout ships to get better sensor readings of her vessel. Arya, what's our current power output? The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately. Fusion reactors are operating at 12% capacity, Captain. All systems are functioning normally. We could increase to full combat power in approximately 4 minutes if necessary. And our defensive status? Shields are at standby power but can be brought to full strength in 30 seconds. Point defense systems are active. All weapon systems are online but not powered. Chen smiled slightly. The Indomitable was barely using any of its capabilities. But even at minimum power, it was probably stronger than the entire alien fleet combined. This was exactly what humanity's leaders had hoped for when they authorized the Titan-class construction program. The plan had been simple, but ambitious. Instead of trying to match alien civilizations ship for ship, humanity would build vessels so powerful that numbers wouldn't matter. Each Titan-class ship could face an entire fleet and win. More importantly, they were so obviously powerful that most enemies would choose negotiation over combat. Captain, called the communications officer. We're receiving another transmission from the alien flagship. Put it through. Admiral Zethkar appeared on the screen again. He looked much less confident than during their first conversation. Captain Chen, I've been in communication with the other members of the Galactic Council. We would like to continue our diplomatic discussions. Of course, Admiral. What would you like to discuss? First, we need to understand your intentions regarding council space. Do you plan to expand into territories currently under our protection? Chen had been expecting this question. Admiral, humanity has no territorial ambitions beyond our current borders. We have more than enough space for our growing population within the systems we already control. We're not interested in conquest. Then what do you want? Trade relationships, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, the same things most civilizations want when they meet new neighbors. Chen paused. We'd also like assurance that the Council won't interfere with human colonies or attempt to integrate us against our will. The alien admiral was quiet for several moments. Chen could see him consulting with advisors who were probably telling him things he didn't want to hear. Finally, he spoke again. Captain, the Galactic Council has maintained peace and stability for thousands of years through our integration system. Independent civilizations create complications. What kind of complications? Wars, resource conflicts, territorial disputes. When species are allowed to develop independently, they often come into conflict with their neighbors. Integration prevents these problems. Chen considered this. It was probably true that the council system prevented some conflicts, but it also prevented growth, innovation, and freedom. Every species under council control was locked into whatever role the ruling races decided for them. Admiral, I understand your concerns, but humanity has a different approach to galactic peace. We believe strong, independent civilizations that respect each other's sovereignty are more stable than empires built on conquest. And if you're wrong, if your independence leads to conflict, then we'll deal with those conflicts as they arise. But we'll deal with them as free beings, not as subjects of another species' empire. The conversation ended again, but Chen could see this was just the beginning of a much longer negotiation. The aliens were trying to figure out how to handle a situation they had never faced before, a species that was too powerful to conquer, but too independent to ignore. She turned to her officers. Begin preparing detailed proposals for trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. If the Council is willing to recognize our independence, we might be able to work with them. If not, she didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the room understood the implication. Humanity was prepared for either outcome. Admiral Zethkar stood in the center of the emergency council chamber aboard the Nexus, surrounded by holographic images of the 11 other species that ruled the galaxy. Each representative looked as disturbed as he felt. In 3,000 years of galactic history, nothing like this had ever happened. The human vessel is impossible, declared Council Member Thisara, a crystalline being whose body reflected light in strange patterns. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. No single ship could generate that much power. The sensors are working perfectly, Zethkar replied grimly. I've had them checked 3 times. The human ship is everything it appears to be. Council Member Vorth, a gas cloud creature that lived in a mechanical suit, spoke next. Even if their ship is real, they cannot have many such vessels. The resources required would be enormous. They claim to have 7 more ships of similar size plus hundreds of smaller vessels, Zethkar said. And based on the industrial capacity we detected in their data files, they could build more. The chamber fell silent. Each council member was trying to process what this meant for their civilization. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had been the ultimate authority in this region of space. They had built their empire on the simple principle that numbers and organization could overcome any individual advantage. But the humans had changed the equation completely. Their single ship was more powerful than entire council fleets. If they really had 8 such vessels, they could potentially challenge the council's authority across dozens of star systems simultaneously. What are their demands? Asked Council Member Zarek, a tall insectoid creature with multiple arms and glowing compound eyes. They claim they don't want territory. They say they only want trade relationships and recognition of their independence. Zethkar pulled up the communication logs. But they've made it clear they will not accept integration into our system. Unacceptable, Zarek clicked angrily. No species has ever been permitted to remain independent within our sphere of influence. It would set a dangerous precedent. Council Member Nalara, who looked somewhat like a giant sea creature, moved her tentacles in patterns that indicated deep concern. If we allow the humans to remain independent, other species might demand the same treatment. Our entire governmental structure could collapse. Zethkar had been thinking about this exact problem since his first conversation with the human captain. The Galactic Council's power depended on the belief that resistance was futile. Every species they encountered had to believe that joining the Council was their only option for survival. If word spread that humans had successfully negotiated from a position of strength, it could inspire rebellion throughout Council space. Species that had been integrated centuries ago might start wondering if they could fight back. Independent civilizations on the galactic rim might form alliances to resist Council expansion. Have we considered the military option? Asked Council Member Zahn, a reptilian species similar to Zethkar's own people but with darker scales and larger claws. Surely our combined fleets could overwhelm them through sheer numbers. Zethkar had been dreading this question. I've run the tactical projections. The human ship's defensive capabilities appear to be extraordinary. Our weapons might not be able to penetrate their shielding at all. And their offensive weapons, he paused, checking his reports again. Their offensive weapons could destroy our largest ships with single shots. How is that possible? Thyssara's crystalline body flashed with confused colors. What kind of technology do they possess? Advanced fusion reactors that generate exponentially more power than our own. Hull materials we can't identify that seem stronger than anything in our database. Weapon systems based on kinetic bombardment and directed energy that operate on scales we've never seen. Zethkar's voice grew quieter as he continued. They may be centuries ahead of us technologically. The council chamber erupted in discussion as various members argued about the implications. Some insisted the humans must be bluffing. Others suggested immediate retreat to council space. A few recommended attempting to learn more about human technology through espionage or negotiation. Council member Vorth finally called for order. Admiral Zethkar, in your professional military opinion, what would happen if we attempted to force integration through combat? Zethkar had been a military commander for 3 centuries. He had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds and the integration of countless species. He had never before had to consider the possibility of defeat. Complete disaster, he said quietly. Based on what I've observed, the human ship could destroy our entire fleet without taking significant damage. And they have 7 more ships like it plus supporting vessels. If we attack them, we lose. If they decide to retaliate against council space. He didn't finish the sentence. What about our automated defense networks? Asked Zarek. Surely our orbital platforms and system fortifications could stop them. Our defense networks are designed to stop traditional fleets with traditional weapons. The humans could probably bypass them entirely or destroy them from ranges where they can't fight back. Zethkar pulled up tactical displays showing human space. Look at their colony arrangement. Perfect spacing for mutual defense, industrial capacity distributed across multiple systems, defensive platforms around every inhabited world. They've been planning for this kind of confrontation for decades. Council member Nalara's tentacles writhed with agitation. How long have they been watching us? Unknown, but probably years or even decades. They seem to know our standard integration procedures perfectly. They know about our tributary species, our trade routes, even our internal political structure. Zethkar highlighted portions of the human data transmission. This level of intelligence gathering suggests a very sophisticated observation network. The implications were terrifying. If humans had been watching galactic civilization for years, they knew exactly where the Council was strong and where it was vulnerable. They had prepared for this confrontation, while the Council remained completely ignorant of their existence. What do they want from us now? Asked Council Member Zahn. A formal treaty recognizing human space as independent territory, trade agreements that would give them access to galactic markets, cultural exchange programs. Zethkar paused. And they want assurance that we won't attempt forced integration of other species within their local area. They want to protect other species from us? Thyssara's lights flashed bright red with anger. They dare to question our right to govern? They're not questioning our right to govern council space, Zethkar corrected. They're establishing boundaries. They're telling us there are limits to how far our authority extends. This was the heart of the problem. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had believed their authority was unlimited. They expanded wherever they wanted, integrated whoever they found, and answered to no one. The humans were politely but firmly telling them those days were over. Admiral, Council Member Vorth said slowly, what are your recommendations? Zethkar looked around the chamber at the faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They were looking to him for answers he wasn't sure he could provide. The old certainties were gone. The Council's position as the ultimate galactic authority was being challenged by a species they had barely known existed. "I recommend we negotiate," he said finally. "We accept their terms, establish diplomatic relations, and hope they meant what they said about not wanting territory. Because the alternative is a war we cannot win." The silence that followed was the sound of an empire realizing it was no longer invincible. The age of Galactic Council supremacy was ending, and none of them knew what would take its place. The signing ceremony took place in neutral space, exactly halfway between the human colony of New Geneva and the edge of Council territory. Two massive ships faced each other across the void, the UHSF Indomitable and the Council flagship the Nexus. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the ship's main conference room, a space large enough to hold 1,000 people comfortably. The room had been designed for exactly this kind of occasion, with polished metal walls displaying the flags and emblems of human colonies throughout space. Across from her, Admiral Zethkar represented the Galactic Council. The reptilian commander looked older than he had during their first meeting, as if the past weeks of negotiation had aged him years. Behind him stood representatives from each of the 12 Council species, their various forms creating a strange but impressive display of galactic diversity. Article 1, Chen read from the treaty document. The Galactic Council recognizes the sovereignty and independence of the United Human Space Federation over all territories currently under human control, including all planets, space stations, mining facilities, and shipping lanes within designated human space. Zethkar nodded slowly. Accepted by the Council. Article 2. Both parties agree to establish peaceful trade relationships based on mutual benefit and voluntary exchange. Neither party will attempt to restrict the other's access to galactic markets or interfere with lawful commercial activities. Accepted, the ceremony continued, for over an hour, as they worked through each point of the agreement. Trade protocols, territorial boundaries, dispute resolution procedures, cultural exchange programs, all the framework needed for two powerful civilizations to coexist peacefully. But everyone in the room knew this was about more than trade and territory. This treaty was establishing a new principle in galactic politics, that the Galactic Council's authority had limits, and that some civilizations were strong enough to negotiate as equals rather than subjects. Article 15, Chen continued. Both parties agree to respect the sovereignty and self-determination of independent civilizations within their respective spheres of influence. Neither party will attempt forced integration or conquest of species that have not voluntarily requested membership. This article had been the most difficult to negotiate. The Council had argued for hours about their traditional integration policies, claiming they brought peace and stability to the galaxy. But faced with humanity's obvious military superiority, they had eventually agreed to restrict their expansion activities to species that actually wanted to join their empire. Article 16. In the event of external threats to galactic peace and stability, both parties agree to consult with each other and consider coordinated responses to protect civilian populations and maintain interstellar order. Admiral Zethkar looked up at this article. It was humanity's subtle way of offering partnership rather than mere coexistence. If something threatened the galaxy as a whole, humans and Council forces might fight side by side rather than against each other. Accepted, he said quietly. When the formal readings were complete, both commanders signed the treaty documents using traditional methods from their respective cultures. Chen signed with a simple pen made from metals mined in the Sol system. Zethkar pressed his clawed hand into a bioreactive pad that recorded his genetic signature. Captain Chen, Admiral Zethkar said as they shook hands in the human custom. May I ask you a personal question? Of course, Admiral. How many more ships like the Indomitable does humanity actually possess? Chen's smile was diplomatic but not entirely revealing. Enough, Admiral. We believe in being prepared for any possibility. Prepared for what, exactly? What does humanity expect to face in this galaxy? Chen looked through the conference room's viewing windows at the stars beyond. We don't know what's out there, Admiral. Maybe there are threats neither of us has discovered yet. Maybe there are other civilizations even more powerful than ours. Maybe the galaxy will remain peaceful for centuries. She turned back to face him. But if something dangerous does appear, wouldn't you rather have us as allies than enemies? The question hung between them as the ceremony concluded and the various delegations prepared to return to their ships. As Admiral Zethkar walked back toward the shuttle that would take him to the Nexus, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The Galactic Council was still the largest political organization in the galaxy, still controlled thousands of worlds, still commanded fleets that could overwhelm most civilizations, but they were no longer the ultimate authority in galactic affairs. They now shared space with another major power, one that had proven itself capable of projecting force across interstellar distances. More importantly, the precedent had been set. Independence was possible. Resistance could succeed. Other species throughout the galaxy would eventually hear about humanity's successful negotiation, and some of them would start wondering if they too could demand better treatment from their galactic neighbors. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Chen watched the Council fleet prepare for the journey back to their territory. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their crews probably eager to return to familiar space after weeks of uncomfortable proximity to humanity's massive vessel. "Captain," called Lieutenant Torres from the tactical station, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command." "Put it through." The image of Admiral Harrison appeared on the main screen. He was the commanding officer of the United Human Space Force and one of the architects of humanity's defensive strategy. "Congratulations, Captain Chen. The treaty signing was broadcast throughout human space. You and your crew have made history today." "Thank you, sir. What are our orders now?" "Return to patrol duties in the outer colonies. But stay alert. We're getting reports that some of the independent civilizations on the galactic rim are sending diplomatic inquiries. They want to know more about humanity's approach to interstellar relations." Chen nodded. This was what they had expected. Word of humanity's successful negotiation would spread quickly through the galaxy's communication networks. Species that had been hiding on the edges of known space to avoid Council integration would start wondering if they could find safety in numbers. "Are we prepared to extend protection to other species, sir?" "That depends on the circumstances. We're not looking to build an empire, Captain. But if there are civilizations that share our values and want to work together for mutual defense," Admiral Harrison paused, "we'll evaluate each situation as it develops." The communication ended, leaving Chen to contemplate the future. Humanity had achieved its immediate goals: recognition as an equal power and protection of human space from forced integration. But this was just the beginning of a much larger change in galactic politics. Over the following months, the effects of the treaty became clear throughout the galaxy. 3 independent civilizations on the galactic rim formed a mutual defense pact with humanity, creating the first alternative to Council membership in thousands of years. Several Council member species began quietly requesting more autonomy within the existing system. Most significantly, the galaxy's approach to conflict resolution began to shift. Instead of the Council simply imposing solutions through superior force, disputes increasingly involved negotiation between multiple parties with comparable power. It was messier and more complicated than the old system, but it was also more just. Admiral Zethkar, now serving as the Council's primary liaison with human space, often found himself remembering Captain Chen's final question during the treaty ceremony. What threats might be waiting in the unexplored regions of the galaxy? What challenges might require the combined strength of all galactic civilizations to overcome? He didn't know the answers to those questions, but he was increasingly grateful that when those challenges finally appeared, humanity would be standing with them, rather than against them. The galaxy had become a more complicated place, but it might also have become a safer one. The age of human expansion was just beginning, and with it, a new chapter in galactic history that no one could predict.